Hayrem is joining us from South Korea, and we are going to go into this welcoming phase of our time together, and I'm going to invite Hayrem to start.
안녕하세요. 저는 박혜림입니다. 지금 한국에 있고 지금 이 시간 여러분들과 함께 하게 돼서 정말 반갑고 감사한 마음입니다.
Ropina, relax yourself for now, cause the vibes are gonna righteous, me I tell you. We're gonna reason, we're gonna deal. Enough respect.
Sean bienvenidos y bienvenidas a esta reunión del pueblo de fe. Aquí nos encontramos hermanas y hermanos en Cristo, reunidos para proclamar a través del diálogo, de la oración, del crecimiento espiritual mutuo y a leer las escrituras, las buenas nuevas de Dios para todo el mundo.
Anin indewe maganak. Nin menwenda ayayan oma nungum. Miigwech bizindawiek nungum meu.
Thank you. So, we welcomed you into this space. Well, we have to trust that that's what we did. And now I'm going to invite you to meet in breakout groups and to talk about what you heard, how you felt when you heard what you heard, what you understood, because you may have understood some of what was said, and possibly what strategies you could use to stay present in such a situation when it actually happens to you in real life. Not that this isn't real life, because of course, virtual situations now are real life. However, and we're choosing to do this as part of the disruption because language and accents tend to be disruptive for many of us. So I'll invite you into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. Lead posted the questions too. See, we just have it going on. The questions are posted in the chat, so you'll see them when you go to the breakout rooms, and just reflect with each other. How did you feel? What did you understand? And what strategies did you use to stay present in that time? Welcome back, everyone. I know you were in the middle of a really juicy sentence that you wanted to finish and you were cut off. I'm so sorry. Is there anything that anybody wanted to, any learning that came out of that session that you wanted to share into this space?
One of the comments that Donata said was that he was listening to the music of each of the languages. And I quite like that image of thinking of it as music, because each of the 4 languages sounded very, very different and different rhythms. And so we talked about that a bit in our group.
Nice, yes. Thanks for sharing that.
Our group emphasized how you hear something and how you receive it has to do with the level of trust between the people that are engaged in that conversation.
Yes, our group mentioned that too. Where is she? Can't find her in this, no. But yeah, one of our members mentioned that when there is a level of trust, then it is easier to enter into a space where you are disrupted. Yeah.
In our group, we acknowledge that we've had opportunities through international students and thus to actually learn some greetings but we haven't retained that information because how important was it? But also to recognize that it is the setting and being able to see the body language and that sort of thing that helps us. Yeah.
Somebody commented, you mentioned body language. Thank you, Barbara. And you know, in the one of the attachments that you got about deep listening, one of the things that was suggested that you watch the nonverbal clues. And somebody from our group mentioned that they understood nothing that was being said, but they watched the faces for animated. And I said in my group that I was speaking the Jamaican dialect. I don't know, I'm sure there were Jamaicans on this group. So some people did not recognize it at all, which is fine. And when I'm speaking the Jamaican dialect, yeah, my face will look completely different because there is something deep inside that comes out. So yeah, the animation becomes very, very different.
Along the lines with body language, we also mentioned that inflection and tone of voice also presented more of a, to help us understand that it seemed as though even if we weren't understanding the words, that the language, that it was a welcome that was coming, or something that was kind of along the line of someone that mentioned about trust, that it was okay to, that what we were hearing was something welcoming.
Yeah.
I had shared in my group, and I'll share, I think that watching body language, listening to inflection and these different things, I mean, there is a ethnic component to those things as well. And if we aren't careful, we risk potentially misinterpreting them as much as maybe we misinterpret even the actual words spoken. So one of the things in our own language, I'll just share, is that it's a flat language in that we typically don't express any type of inflection or clue into any type of emotion as we're speaking. And we've changed that a little bit as we become more multi-ethnic and multicultural in our own communities, because it gets misinterpreted so often.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I noticed that. I was able to receive you because I know you, but I could not read your face.
So thank you. And I know many of you here are practitioners of intentional interim ministry and that line of work. So you have been practicing deep listening in your own areas of ministry. And I invite you to use those practices very intentionally as you interact with persons of different races, of different ethnicities, of different languages of origin. For many persons who are either speakers of English as a second language or a third, or from a different culture which uses dialects as the predominant method of verbal exchange, speaking English in its standard form becomes challenging. So for many persons, they have to change the speed at which they speak, they have to translate, they have to write. And this can be challenging if they want to make sure that they're communicating properly. So I keep saying they, and I'm going to move into talking a little bit about code switching, and I'll go into I. as I share that, yes, I work for the United Church of Canada's General Council Office, which is the national or denominational body, so highest body in our church, where all the enlightened folks are, except me. And our church has embraced the tenet of becoming an intercultural church, intentionally being so. The General Council Office has a diverse staff, and I joined the staff in January of last year. As part of my work, I was invited to lead devotion one day, and I did. And I will tell you of the challenge of a 3-letter word. I presented a message in chapel, and after the message was presented and chapel was done, a lovely, well-meaning person in this office comes up to me and says, I'm saying this to you because I really like you and I want you to go far in this organization. But you have to be careful of the way you pronounce the word ASK. Because I pronounced it ask. And she said, it sounded as if you were saying AXE. And I couldn't focus on anything else you were saying. So now you need to know that if you are to get anywhere, you might very well need to pronounce that word differently. I said, thank you very much. But you know what it did? Every time I'm going to say that word in the company of anybody else, I stop and think about, how am I supposed to pronounce this word? Will they hear it as potato or potato? And will it affect the rest of what I say?
Mm.
And this is at our level. So guess what I did? And I've told my supervisor that I'm doing it. My supervisor is British. She has the best accent in the world and the accent that nobody will quarrel with, because who can quarrel with the British for speaking their own language? So now I intentionally say ask. But it means I have to stop and say it first. Think about that. So this leads me into the code switching piece, because all of us do it. All of you do the code switching. When you are at your mother's house, you speak differently than when you're speaking to your best friend on the phone and when you're speaking to your child. So everybody switches codes. However, when we're dealing with persons of racial or ethnic minorities, code switching can be a matter of life or death. So code switching is the intentional, and I've there is a link that you'll get after this. It is the art of changing, adjusting behavior, whether the behavior is language, dress, or even approach, so that it is appropriate for the situation in which one finds oneself. For Black people or for racialized minorities, it has implications for their physical survival, for economic advancement, like my girl who told me, I want you to go far, or for their well-being. Code switching can have the effects of making you move forward in your career. It makes you look more professional. It makes you sound more professional. It gives you the likelihood of being hired. It helps you to be seen as a leader and all the rest of it, but it also raises the mental health challenges. It depletes cognitive resources and reduces the authentic self-expression and contributes to burnout. I am going to invite you to watch a video, which is only 3 minutes long. And
I started taking the bass of my voice, so I was less intimidating. Thank you, for example. That would become, I'm most little subtle things.
That's code switching. Code switching is a term widely used to describe when somebody changes their accent, tone of voice, and mannerisms depending on what space they're in. We all do it, but for many Black people working or studying in white majority environments, it's used for survival.
The reality is I'm a product of my environment, which is I grew up in East London, I eat West Indian food, I often operate in West Indian circles, and those are all factors that do not easily fit into a corporate environment.
For me being a Black babe, it comes with an extra pressure, a pressure that you somewhat have to adhere to fit in. I did adhere for about a year, and then I just couldn't do it.
I would definitely say that there were numerous occasions where I had to code switch. I mean, I was at Cambridge, for goodness sake. I'm this girl coming from East London. I know it is a bit of a stereotype because, you know, people speak very, very differently. There are people who are very well spoken, but for the most part, you know, we use a lot of colloquialisms, a lot of slang. I knew that if I say things in a particular way, people are not going to understand me.
For most, code switching and adapting to your environment is a useful way to get ahead in the workplace. But could a world where workplaces fully allow people to be themselves ever exist?
As a Black person, as a Black woman, we have a history of bending and adjusting to appease others.
The reality is, for someone like myself who entered the profession to represent young Black men, who I sometimes feel are not given a fair opportunity, if code switching allowed me to be in a position to represent those type of people, then it is what it is.
The whole code switching thing, of course, I would love to know that I didn't have to code switch at any point. But I also recognize that not everyone comes from where I come from. Not everybody has the same experience as me. Not everybody shares the same background as me. And so we have to be accommodating to each other.
I am an absolute advocate for being yourself. Like, be you authentically. There is only one you, and that is your superpower. There is no duplicate. No one can do it like you. Even if you had a twin, no one can do it. No one can say it like you. No one can be you. And that's what makes you so unique.
That verse from Psalm 139, you are fearfully and
wonderfully made,
except when you're not. So being who you are could be a challenge in some circumstances. So code switch it. Be who they need you. And I'm sorry, I have to say they. Be who they needed you to be when they need you to be that way. And then when you're with your folks, switch it back. You will see that the link that you will get to an article about code switching talks about how systems and organizations and maybe churches that you're part of could help to dismantle these pieces, so that those persons who are minorities do not have to do this extra layer of work in order to be accepted, to be on the same level, to be offered leadership positions, and to be seen as being